Hey guys, in today's video we're going to be looking at the civilizations that lived in the Americas before contact with the Spanish, and then we're going to look at how the Spanish were able to conquer these civilizations and set up a vast empire on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. Here are your video goals. By the end of the video you should be able to describe the different types of societies that lived in the Americas before the Spanish conquest. You should be able to describe the types of technology that the Aztec and Inca had and compare them to different Eurasian civilizations that we have learned about. You should be able to describe in general how the Spanish were able to conquer the Americas. And you should be able to talk about some of the effects of the Spanish conquest on the Americas. For your vocab, you should be able to define the Aztec, Inca. You should know who Cortez and Pizarro are. And you should know what the encomienda system is. So before Columbus, there were a variety of societies living in the Americas. There were many millions of people living across these two continents. Historians disagree about how many millions, but it was lots and lots of people organized into a whole bunch of different independent societies. Some of these societies were still living as hunter-gatherers. These were usually people living in remote places, like middle of the Amazon rainforest, or very far north or far southern places where it was very cold. A lot of these people lived as early farmers, growing corn as their staple crop, but also still doing a lot of hunting and fishing on top of farming. And there were some people who lived in complex civilizations. Civilization had emerged in central Mexico and Central America and Western South America, and had been growing and developing for over 1,000 years at this point. When the Spanish arrived, there are two major civilizations thriving in the Americas. In central Mexico, you have the Aztec civilization and several other civilizations connected to them. And in Western South America, you have the Inca Empire, which controlled most of the Andean mountain range. So one thing that is important to note, though, is that all of these societies, from the hunter-gatherers on up, are still living in the Stone Age. Metal tools, that is, bronze tools, have not been discovered yet, except by the Inca, who have just discovered bronze tools. So when the Spanish get there, they are encountering civilizations and societies that are thousands of years behind them in terms of technological development. Let's look at the Aztec real quick. So the Aztec, you can see in the map here, controlled parts of central and southern Mexico. The building block for Aztec power was their very effective form of farming that was based on constructing floating gardens called chinampas. Chinampas were a type of hydroponic farm. In fact, this was a technology that the Aztec had developed that the Europeans did not understand. And how it would work is the plants would grow on this floating raft, and the roots would go down through the raft and soak up as much water as they needed from the lakes below. This super effective type of farming allowed for the Aztecs to build very large cities, the largest of which was their capital city of Tenochtitlan, which was actually in the middle of a lake. And this city was larger than any of the cities in Spain at the time when the Spanish attacked them. Because they were able to have such a large city and support so many people, the Aztec were able to spread out and conquer people around them. And one of the main things that they wanted when they conquered people was they wanted tribute, both in the form of food and other resources, but also in the form of people. And these people would be taken back to the capital city, and there they would be sacrificed to the gods of the Aztec. The Aztec believed that this was necessary because otherwise the gods would become unhappy and destroy the world. So they believed that the sacrifice was needed to keep the world going. However, this practice made them very unpopular among their neighboring tribes. which led to a lot of instability in the region. The other major civilization was the Inca. The Inca had one of the largest empires in the world at this point, and it was unique because it spanned a very rugged mountain range called the Andes. The key to Inca civilization was their method of farming on the mountainsides, and this is called terraced farming. So instead of farming on a slope, which would cause all the soil just to wash away, they instead built little steps called terraces and would farm on the terrace, and they could use this to produce lots of food. They would connect their empire together by building an advanced network of roads and bridges, and this allowed them to build an empire on the very high slopes of the Andes Mountains. One thing that the Inca lacked, though, was a writing system. The Inca did not know how to write, and they stored all of their information in complex systems of knots called quipu. Imagine that. Instead of writing, they tied knots. And using these knots, they were able to keep a complex empire together. Now, if you look at these civilizations and look at their level of technological development, you'll see that they resemble the ancient Mesopotamian civilizations that we learned about at the beginning of this class, which existed more than 4,500 years earlier. Like ancient Mesopotamia, they had large city-states or very early empires based on intensive agriculture. In ancient Mesopotamia, they used the rivers. In the Aztec Empire, they used the chinampas, and in the Inca Empire, they used terraces. But in all cases, they relied on intensive agriculture to support city populations. They would build monumental architecture, monuments, in the form of stepped pyramids, and they would then, at these stepped pyramids, perform religious ceremonies in which they would sacrifice to the gods. Ancient Mesopotamia had both bronze and writing. The Aztec had writing but not bronze, and the Inca had bronze but not writing. So in some ways, ancient Mesopotamia was actually more advanced than these American civilizations, even though Mesopotamia was 4,500 years earlier. So when the Spanish come over, they're encountering civilizations that are thousands of years behind them in terms of technological development. And things are not going to go well for the American civilizations that the Spanish encounter. So over the course of 50 years, the Spanish are going to conquer a huge empire in the Americas, an empire that is over 17 times larger than Spain itself. The conquest begins in the Caribbean islands, which is the first place that the Spanish discover. In the 1490s and the early 1500s, Christopher Columbus, who was the guy who sailed the ships to the Caribbean, is made the governor of the Spanish island of Hispaniola. This island is already, people already live here, but the Spanish bring over soldiers and basically take over the whole island, and then they give the land that used to belong to the natives to themselves. The native peoples are enslaved. Some of them try to run away, but it's an island, so you can't get very far. The natives are treated brutally and are punished if they do not work to find gold for the Spanish. They could have their hands chopped off or be killed if they fail to bring gold. Unfortunately, there is not very much gold on the island of Hispaniola, and after only a couple years, the native population is reduced by 90%, and the Spanish have taken over the entire island. The next stage of Spanish conquest happens in the 1520s. A guy named Cortez goes to the island of Hispaniola, and from there he decides that he is going to conquer and take over the mainland of Mexico. So he lands on the coast with 500 men, and from there he heads inland to where the Aztecs live, which remember is right around here. He gets help from other tribes who live in the area who hate the Aztec. When he gets close to the Aztec, he is greeted as a god. Imagine, though, if you've never seen a guy wearing armor, if you've never seen a guy on a horse, if you've never seen a gun, you might have thought that they were gods too. So at first they are invited into the capital city of the Aztecs, and they are allowed to chill with the emperor Montezuma II. However, eventually the Spanish become quite annoying and are kicked out of the city. It's because they keep demanding more and more gold from the emperor. So the Aztecs kick them out, and the Spanish at this point get angry, and they rally other native tribes from the area who hate the Aztec, encircle the capital city, blast it with cannons, and eventually take it over. And from there, they're able to expand their control and take over all of southern Mexico, which they rename New Spain. And the last phase of Spanish conquest happens in South America, when Pizarro, who was actually related to Cortes and wanted to be like Cortes, leads a band of 200 soldiers to the west coast of South America. And he lands there and then marches up into the mountains. Imagine marching into a new land, a new mountain range that you don't know anything about, with 200 dudes, with the intention of conquering all of it. So he hears tale of civil wars going on in the area, which had to do with the fact that the native leader had just died and they had fought over who would be the next one. He asks around and he marches his 200 dudes to find a huge Inca army headed by the new emperor. He insults the army, provokes it into attacking him, and then defeats it, shooting them with cannons and charging them with horses, killing over 10,000 Inca soldiers. At the end of the battle, he captures the emperor. He demands a huge ransom where a whole room is filled with silver, and then at the end kills the emperor anyway. He then marches south to conquer the capital city. Within a year, he has conquered the whole Inca Empire and declares himself the new ruler of the area. So the Spanish, in 50 years, conquered the whole Caribbean, most of Mexico, and the west coast of South America. Why were they able to do this? The main reason is that they had more powerful technology. For example, they were wearing steel armor, using steel swords against people who had mostly stone weapons. Also, the Spanish had horses, which the Americans had never seen before, and cannons. But also, the Spanish carried with them powerful diseases that killed many natives before they even got to see the Spanish. These included influenza, smallpox, and measles. We'll talk about why the Spanish had these diseases tomorrow. Also, the Spanish had a cultural tradition of fighting and taking over other cultures because for centuries they had been engaged in warfare against Islamic kingdoms in the south of Spain. Now, it's important to think about why the Spanish had these things and the Americans didn't. For example, why isn't it that the Americans had advanced technology and the Spanish were still using stone tools? We'll think more about this later. After the Spanish take over their empire, which you can see here in the yellow, other European nations try to do the same thing. As a result of this, what you get is a 90% reduction in the population levels of Native Americans. 90% of Native Americans die over the course of this conquest. The Spanish set up a system of race-based social stratification where white people are on top, mixed race people are in the middle, and Native Americans are at the bottom, basically treated as slaves. This is set up legally under a system known as the encomienda system. And how this works is all of the newly conquered land is given to white Europeans. And this allows the white European landowners to tax and force labor upon the people who live in this land. The other Europeans conquer Spain, and by the middle 1700s, huge chunks of the Americas have been taken over and conquered by the Spanish, the Portuguese, the French, and the English. So that's all we have for today. Tomorrow we will talk about the broader implications and global effects of this conquest. For now, just make sure you can answer these questions. Thanks for paying attention.